welcome to ComplyPlus Presents. This is episode 16, and today I'm joined with Richard. Back as the same team today, although we do have some guests coming up next week, which is quite exciting. We'll mention that at the end of the episode. But today we're going to look at technology adoption in regulated services. I've got a few sort of questions where we're going to look into, what do we mean by technology adoption? How are these services procured? What's the thought process that has to go in place? What technology is available? What's likely to be available as well in the future? And also reflect a little bit on our journey with technology adoption and working with regulated service providers as well. So, let's make a start. So, I suppose the first point is almost this pre and post. It's almost like before Christ, after Christ, but I suppose COVID, the big sort of elephant in a way in the middle of what was possible before it, then the brains of the world, the innovation, and now what's available after it, and the exciting journey that technology is sort of on now. So how do you analyse the landscape from a then versus now sort of scenario?
Yeah, everything now, you look at it pre-COVID and post-COVID. And when you look at the typical adoption curve, it was going the natural way before COVID.
Yes.
Where we had a few, innovators who were quite excited about the technology, although at the time it was clunky and experimental, but they were quite happy to experiment with it. Then we started to get some early adopters around 2018, 2019. And it was quite exciting to the point where we actually had a quite successful blended learning model where we're now working with organizations to build capacity for their learning and development departments, organizations that would otherwise never afford to build an internal learning development department. We're quite happy with the blended learning model where we come in and work with their teams, do their needs analysis, and come up with training programs to meet those needs.
Bespoke and customized.
Exactly. And that initial investment, yes, there was a cost to it, but actually long term, it paid off. And tech allowed that. So obviously during COVID, the many organizations that didn't care at all about some of the tech now that is now readily available, they had no choice but to adapt very quickly. Even the laggards had no choice. So everyone was forced, so it tipped that curve right up. It
was sink or swim, really, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Sink or swim. As simple as that. Even huge local authorities, the government departments, some of the companies that we ended up working with during COVID, it was quite an exciting time, but chaotic time as well. Because people were not ready. They had not quite established their needs. They had a lot of legacy systems in place that could not work with our systems because they were built on old models.
Older models that weren't compatible,
Exactly. Compatibility was a big issue. And but it was an exciting time. And when you look post-COVID now, software as a service is now common language in healthcare, social care, in early years, in schools. And the thing, before COVID, to even mention SaaS to people,
I think, the thought of bringing software in and almost the feeling amongst the staff would have been so daunting, wouldn't it? But now you've got to embrace it.
Exactly. So there's more readiness, but obviously because people, sort of like a gold rush, isn't it? Everyone who went to California during the gold rush, the majority of them didn't make it. They didn't get a single penny back.
No.
But some people, got a lot out of the gold rush. So it's the same as this. It was a massive gold rush in a way, forced gold rush, but actually some people did better than others. And for others actually disrupted their businesses so much they're still yet to recover. You get people signing on to 7-year contracts without reading the contract. And then they realize they've signed a 5-year, 7-year contract, very punitive. And we're now working with providers who are stuck in unwinnable sort of situations.
They're tied into contracts, like you say, and they want to escape those contracts, but they have a liability in terms of paying the rest of that contract. And then how do you justify them procuring a new system to also pay for that, because it's not going to be free as well. So I think that they're in a bit of trouble. And I think your point, I think you wrote about this in your recent Observatory article about impact assessments as well. When people are adopting technology, they're not thinking necessarily, what impact is it going to have? What do we have staff that are capable? Is there going to be additional training needed?
And even when you go back, some of the work that we did, from 2012 to 2015, looking at interoperability. So even within the NHS, it's taken years and billions, if I'm not mistaken, it's over £100 billion now spent trying to build some sort of system that will get the NHS, different bits of the NHS, to talk to each other. And if you go to your GP and they access the system,
documents
like last week, I think 2 weeks ago, the government was celebrating that 87% adoption. And I think, but it's only partial. Why are we celebrating mediocrity? Yeah, if you spend even £1 billion, you want something that works.
You want a good return.
So why are we supposed to celebrate some sort of partial solution?
Well, if a private business got those results,
you'd be out of business. Would be fired. You'd be fired. You'd be fired. So, but again, when we're working in a very politicized landscape where there are very few independent voices, because if your daily bread is dependent on you keeping the commissioners happy, the regulators happy, you're not going to state the obvious. Well, the emperor has no clothes. You're going to try to label it somehow in a more palatable way. But we've learned actually that there's nothing gained in that. So you call a spade a spade. Yeah. And actually you speak for hundreds of thousands of people that otherwise don't have a voice. Yeah. And it's crucial that we do that. And even some of the companies that are putting people into these punitive contracts, you think, God, in the day of AI, where solutions can change drastically within a week or two, because a company like DeepSeek, for example, comes up with a solution that could make things so much easier. Different elements. You look at machine learning, you look at agents, AI agents, and things like that. Why would you tie yourself up in a 5-year contract, 7-year contract for a SaaS product? Those business models are outdated. They have no place in the modern world. And for us as a business, actually, one of the things is, although even last night when we were talking at the Chamber of Commerce in London, they'd say, well, we don't mind people stopping when they stop using our system and find a better solution. We actually, we try to understand why they want to leave, but we help them leave. We're not going to be bullied into dropping our prices. We're not going to be bullied into accepting terms from bigger companies that we are supplying services to. They're not happy, they can move on. It's as simple as that. Yeah. There are many other people.
It's a two-way relationship.
Exactly. It's a two-way relationship. And I think that's the biggest problem in the healthcare sector, social care sector, in education, where there are overlords who dictate how things are done. Too many people, too many masters to please. And it's not a sustainable model at all.
No. No. So what are some of the common mistakes in tech procurement? I think we've touched on a couple of examples in the landscape discussion, but what are some of the ones you see? I mean, I've got several examples from different clients I've worked with over the years, and I'm sure you've got experiences or know people from your own network that have gone through these mistakes. Yeah, it's interesting you asking me that question. It's a question that I was actually thinking of asking you. To say, because I tend to rant sometimes about these sort of things on LinkedIn, and I know I speak for many. That's why I do that. But I think it's like last night. What is business acumen, for example? How are you a good negotiator, or are you just bullying people into accepting terms? Yeah. So for me, in tech procurement, that is the biggest problem. Even in the NHS, actually, procurement of tech is done very poorly. I remember many years ago, this is over 10 years ago, when we were doing research in technology adoption in the NHS, and you track technologies to see how they originated. You find that one doctor or one senior manager made a decision to bring a tech, and you look at the justification. Was there a tender put out? What was the process? And it's a very cumbersome process where when you look back, you think, hang on, there's poor decision-making around technology adoption. We need
to educate people around it. The universities, the NHS itself, when you're training nurse leaders, medical leaders, and NHS Leadership Academy and all that. I think there's a gap there where people are not assessing properly the different solutions that are presented to them. They're not looking at the needs. And even when you look at intellectual property, as I would say, some of the technologies that are refined and perfected in the NHS, they end up leaving and going to private hands to the point where even some of those NHS trusts themselves cannot afford those technologies. So I think there's a lot that can be said about adoption decisions and checking organizational readiness as well for any technology that you bring in, whether it's clinical decision support system, whether it's an AI tool to sort of for data mining and looking at what's happening and how we can improve patient outcomes. Because a lot of these technologies, they're brought in and they're not used properly or they're not used fully. So you've got, say, 10 modules. People end up using just one module and think, so why did you take this in
and pay for
all this and tie yourself into this thing when you're only using one module?
One element of it.
Why don't you just negotiate to get that one module in? Then you can add the other bits as and when you need them, because you may never need them. And we've done that ourselves, where you see companies that are using 5, 6, 7 technologies that are sometimes conflicting. And there's a repetition of what each of the systems are doing. And then how the data also, where does the data go? That data is not going into a dashboard where people can use it meaningfully. So there are reports lying at the back. You ask people about them. Nobody even knows that those reports exist. So why do you have this tech that gives you all these opportunities to improve your services and patient outcomes, and you're not using it effectively? So I think since we started doing this podcast and writing the observatory, the Health and Social Care Innovation Observatory on LinkedIn, I've started going back to my research years to say, look, why do some technologies get better adopted and better used and others not? So I flip the question back to you. When you look at it, actually, because you sell our tech, because you were a commercial officer before you became chief operating officer, you have sold our tech, but also you now work with teams that build our tech. What do you see as common mistakes based on actually lived experiences, the people that you're dealing with day to day, post-COVID even, most importantly?
I think for me, there's a groupthink within health and social care, either business owners or people with the sort of procurement style titles, compliance officers, directors, head of training and development or learning and development. And what you notice, particularly in certain geographical areas, is, this company up the road offering a similar service, got this tech in and it's worked great, results are better, business is growing, more money's coming in, la-da-da. Then the other company just gets it in. They haven't really researched it, but they've heard it works. They trust probably this other person. They get it in, and it doesn't work for their business. So like you say, I think doing a proper needs analysis and sometimes asking what do we actually need for this business, just because we're also offering domiciliary care in the community, or just because we run a residential care home up the road from this other business, does it actually mean it's going to work? Have you looked at the people you've got? Have you looked at the service users you've got, and so on? So I think for me, the group think or almost carbon copying of what other people are doing is a problem. Because like you say, just because you're offering, there's loads of other businesses like ours, but they don't do things the way we do. So I don't see why in health and social care people have that mindset to sort of say we're running a similar service, so everything is the same. We know that is is not the case. So I think that's one of the big problems. Like you say, the other common one is people not really knowing what they need to get. There's a lot of this checklist thinking. I think we've covered it on another podcast, particularly when it comes to training. But even when it comes to sort of technology, we need something that can do this, we need something that can do that. And like you say, people either oversubscribe to things that they don't need or they pay for that they don't use. Or sometimes actually they don't get enough. They just get one element to tick one box. So, there's an inspection coming up. We've had an incident, maybe it's to do with safeguarding, maybe there's been a first aid issue or resuscitation issue on site. We need to fix that problem. But then policies, procedures, other things are sat in a filing cabinet in an office growing dust.
And they're not updated.
And they're not updated, yeah.
Because
They're however
actually,
many years old.
Yeah, if I'm a commissioner or inspector, I'm going to look at those policies. And then they're not matching actually what you're doing in practice.
What you're actually doing now.
We've seen that actually with some of our clients.
And since post-COVID, the amount of, I know the amount of work you and some of the guys in the content and research side have had to do to either update courses or update the policies we offer, the procedures we offer. There's been that much change, and I don't think, I'd say over 50% of organisations have probably got some element of their policy, their procedure, or training they're doing right now that's probably outdated. So yeah, I think that for me is another issue, either oversubscribed or undersubscribed, or focusing on one particular area because maybe in your last CQC you failed on this little bit, but there's been another 12 months since then. So don't just focus just on that bit. What could happen in 12 months' time? And yeah, like I say, I think the final point is poor understanding of what technology can do. It's not a miracle worker. Although technology is amazing, it's getting better all the time. The stuff that we see coming out of these, particularly these AI sort of organisations and funding companies, is crazy. But it can only still do so much. It can't replace humans, for example, in every aspect. It can't do some of the things that need to be done in regulated service providers. It can't do everything. So I think understanding actually what these things can and can't do, and taking time to do reviews, do pilot testing, phased implementation, can really help you understand, one, is it the right technology? But two, is it actually going to work? Is this actually going to go anywhere? And I think with a lot of technology now, there's things like free trials. There's different ways of getting around these sort of these scary sort of big contracts that you feel like you're signing your life or the business away to. So I think they're the common things over the last, particularly since we launched ComplyPlus in 2022. That they've been some of the main sort of pitfalls I've seen.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's a tool at the end of the day. There's some jobs that are better done by humans.
Exactly,
with aid from software as a service solutions, AI tools and things like that. But also, when you look at how people just copy each other, that's how innovations diffuse. That's the natural diffusion of innovations sort of theory is there has to be that community, that ecosystem to say if they're early adopters, the innovators and early adopters. So there's nothing wrong generally in saying, well, look, in our region, this company has done well because they're using this tool. But it's not just about taking the tool and using it. It's about actually figuring out whether it works for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You have that curiosity, yes, to say, well, I wonder whether this could work for us. Not, it worked for this company, so we've got to take it and use it as well, because then maybe we can get an outstanding rating with
because they got outstanding, or that director's just bought a new big house. It doesn't mean that it's going to be.
But other thing as well, because we were talking about this last week, free trial periods, demos. Do people take them seriously? Because actually it's your chance, because we do this in our business. So because rather than developing modules all the time, we could find something on the market that we want to add as a module, as a plugin or something like that. Then we take advantage of the free trial so that we test it to see whether it works for us. We take advantage of the demo. But many companies don't do that, especially the service providers.
I was about to say, I think it's a really interesting point, and I think the biggest factor there is time and priority. People, we know how hectic some of these regulated services are. We don't need to go down that sort of garden path right now, but people don't give it the time because they don't see it as a priority. That's what I notice. Almost the rudeness sometimes, where some of our teams have been sat on calls waiting for people to do a demonstration. There's maybe one or two of our representatives there. We've prepared something. They just don't turn up. And then maybe the next day they might respond to your email that says, look, we were on the demo. Do you want to reschedule? And sometimes it's just blind ignorance. And I know these people are busy, but for me, it's they don't put priority. They don't appreciate the time to put in for the greater good in a way. Because if the time is invested there and things work, how much time and efficiencies would you save in the future?
But also the pain and suffering that you could avoid.
Exactly.
Because if you don't turn up for the demo, if you don't use the free trial period, then you sign up anyway.
Some people end up panic signing.
Then
anyway,
6 months later, you realize actually that you have so many questions that should no, but that's the truth, isn't it? And you get frustrated, scenario, and then you start thinking this technology is not fit for purpose or whatever. But actually, you had a chance to appraise it, because you can't have a perfect solution. There's nothing called a perfect solution. Or even all our competitors, actually, some of them have very good tech, but probably not relevant for 90% of the service providers out there, right? And some of them have so-so tech, clunky, but actually meets the basic needs. But actually, it's up to every single provider to appraise. And that's where the investment is not happening.
Yes.
And I think until people, even some people that are very close to us, service providers that we're friends with, it's the same.
Yeah, mindset change is needed.
No, they come to you to put out fires, and they think, is there a tech that can help to sort this? And then it's you really that needs to sort this. It's not about the tech doing things for you.
The tech can't, I completely agree. Yeah. And it's a really good point, actually, about, because we do it in our personal lives. We get a free week's trial for this app on our smartphone or our tablet. And usually when it comes to our own lives and our social lives, we'll invest the time, we'll stress it, or we'll get the most value out of the free trial because we think we're getting this for free. It's great. I can watch this. I can get access to this free content or whatever. But then when it comes to some of these more maybe serious or boring things, that time investment is not always there. And we're probably all guilty of that, in fairness.
I know we talked a little bit about interoperability and integration of systems. Are you finding there to be an appetite for that right now? Because traditionally, people wanted to keep systems separate. Or this is my system for HR. This is my system for timesheet management. This is my system for e-learning. You're trying to sell me an integrated system. That doesn't make sense. That's not how we buy. How is this? What's the situation like now?
I think it's improving gradually because people are seeing value in having a consolidated system. And why wouldn't you? Why would you want to have different logins, different access requirements for this platform, that platform, different contracts, different suppliers in your your management accounts every month? Why would you want that? So I think the market is warming up. But again, it goes back to some of the earlier points on is the market aware of some of these solutions and can they interpret it all? For businesses like ours that are trying to create consolidated solutions, we're still seeing a lot of more people, sign up for the standalone items. And then we have more conversations and then we move them on then to the other things and they almost upgrade. That is a more common journey I think we're seeing. I wouldn't say it's happening across the whole sort of client base, but I think that is a journey that we're seeing more. Oh, I've heard you can do this. I read your newsletter last week. Oh, you can do this as well. So I think, pitching the whole system is still a challenge. We are getting more things like, oh, do you have APIs? Could we integrate? We've already got a system for this.
So people actually are starting to use the right language.
Even the right terminology is being brought into some of those conversations. So I think it's improving, but I still think there's a long way to go. And even a responsibility from us as a provider of these services is trying to work with businesses at that sort of higher level or work with these service providers at that higher level, speak with the right people, speak with the people that can make it happen. A lot of these conversations can't be done on a morning commute on the bus, meeting.
It needs investment.
It needs time. And sometimes actually one sort of meeting or demo might not be enough. You might need to have several discussions, but I think things are improving, but I'd probably say slowly.
Yeah. So I made a note there to say, because these are conversations that you and I have a lot, because you have people coming to us and they're signed to a 5-7 year contract that they can't get out of.
Yeah.
But it's not fit for purpose.
No.
Because they didn't invest enough time in looking at it. So we have realized actually that, okay, look, we can support these companies. We offer them a more flexible contract that is then can be scaled.
Yeah.
Right? Because we know that they're paying for a dead system that they're not using, but they still need to run their business. So offer them a flexible, scalable, and user-led sort of functionality to say, look, what are you using of that system that you're stuck with that is working well? What is not working well? Because, for example, some of the clients will have a very good system, a clinical decision support, for example, but they're using paper documents for managing accidents and incidents. And you think, but that's a simple solution. It's a very simple solution. It's about digitizing that process. It doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. So we'll give you that as a module. But what data can we push from that system that you're stuck with that is still useful? Because there's no point looking at the whole thing now because you're not using it.
Yeah.
And I guess what happens as well in the sector is when people get fed up, they just stop completely. So final one, we've got to talk about trends, risks, and market shifts. Where do you see things going in an era where there are private equity companies buying up companies like ours, consolidation, well-funded competitors, and where there's uncertainty? So NHS England abolished, CQC in transition, Ofsted in transition, ICBs in transition, geopolitics, or even a selection of the Pope is a big story, isn't it? And it can affect how businesses are going to work. How do you see things moving forward in this area?
Obviously the people we serve are governed by regulators, and really they hold the power. The people that are looking after things like the Care Quality Commission, Ofsted, all these big regulators, because at the end of the day, service providers, although probably not very well, are led by those people because they're the ones they have to satisfy, as well as the service users. So I think the scary thing is when you hear things like NHS England's being abolished, you sort of start thinking, what could that mean for a business like ours, that's a private business, that have started having conversations with people in these circles, which is great, but that doesn't mean you're going to be part of the future. And I think for me, that's the bit that is relatively scary, because like we've discussed on this podcast before, you've got these so-called charities, then they start privatizing, they're selling similar services to us, so investing in technology.
So you're referring to the likes of, the skills councils where...
Yeah, skills councils primarily, yeah.
And even NHS England, with e-learning for healthcare, health education, they ended up gobbling up everything.
Yeah, because they inform the service providers that these are the people to go to solve your training, your compliance needs, if you need any consultancy for your business. And that drives the traffic then away from people like us. So I think that element of it, who knows what's going to happen, but there could also be a lot more opportunities for organisations like ours to keep innovating and keep finding solutions. And that's the sort of positive spin that we're taking right now. Even with our development plans for the ComplyPlus platform right now, we're talking about some really interesting technology, not necessarily too complex, just doing the basics but doing them well and making it easy for people to use, because we know technology adoption among staff in particular is difficult. Just because the CEO could use it or whatever doesn't mean the person on the ward or the person visiting a service user's home can. And I think for me that sort of accessibility is really, really important. So I think for us it's very much, look, we've got a direction with our software. Yes, we're guided heavily by client feedback. We're directed heavily by what's going on in these service providers' sort of locations and workplaces. But for me, the key is to keep adding more value and more useful tools and keep hearing about what's going on, what are the current problems, what are the challenges. Like even last week there was, or 2 weeks ago, there was a big thing about paramedics being attacked. I think the cases have gone up over 50% in the last 12 to 18 months in the UK. And that sort of thing makes you think, well, what could be done about that? What could we do about that? What could we offer some sort of training to support people?
We've already done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we had to create something very quickly to just alert health and social care providers and then remind them what the law says and also what organizations can do to support their staff, including post-incident care. Some people need admissions into hospital.
Yeah.
When you get healthcare workers learning self-defense techniques just to go to work. Yeah. It's scary.
It shouldn't be a world that we're in, but we are. So I think for me, and then obviously the obvious trend is technology is here to stay. There's no going back now with some of the old paper-based systems. Obviously the UK as a country has made a commitment to net zero and being greener and so on. So technology is definitely here to stay. And, let's hope everyone continues to embrace it. and providers such as ourselves, but as well as others, keep coming up with good solutions to make the sector better. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a question here that was addressed to me. I think because we asked people to send in questions, so we got this from our customer care team. So they said, what's your advice to a provider looking to adopt new technology this year, so in 2025? So my message, I've got 5 points there, and we discussed most of them here. So be clear about what you need right now.
Yeah.
Don't just grab everything because it's got
That's
all
the first
these,
step,
yeah. Then test before you buy. So take advantage of the free trial period. Take advantage of the demo as well. Then number 3, ask tough questions about integration, scalability, and exit. Right? So don't sign that contract unless you are fully satisfied that it's really suited to you.
Yeah.
And also, it may not be perfect for your needs, but at least you can integrate it with your existing systems, including the paper-based systems as well, to say how can you then scale it from there. Then number 4, avoid long contracts because tech is evolving faster now.
Yeah,
than
especially
any
5 and 7 year contracts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then value support, not sales pressure or beautiful designs. It's not about design, it's about functionality and the ongoing support that you're going to get as your needs change and tech adapts, tech evolves as well.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to adapt to that. So those are my 5 messages. And, and I like this because if we keep the questions coming, then we actually address questions that people are worried about.
Yeah.
And we're not saying we've got all the answers.
No.
But we've got enough experience as a business to discuss these things and find better solutions ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And keep the questions coming. So, thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you've all found this very useful and there's some good takeaways for you all. And we will see you next with a guest of ours. Looking forward to that next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.